muito importante. E agradeço também a Stephanie, que vai colaborar comigo na interlocução da palestrante com a plateia. Bom, eu vou falar um pouco do mini-currículo da professora Olivia Levrini, que é da Universidade de Bolonha. Olivia é professora associada de Educação e História da Física no Departamento de Física e Astronomia da Universidade de Bolonha, Itália. Sua pesquisa atual é direcionada para interdisciplinaridade na educação em ciências, tecnologia, engenharia e matemática, ensino, reconstrução educacional de tópicos avançados de física, relatividade, física quântica, cognição e mudança conceitual, processos de identidade e apropriação, tirei o olho daqui, processo de apropriação, projetos instrucionais sobre tópicos orientados para o futuro, mudanças climáticas, inteligência artificial, computação quântica. Coordena o projeto europeu Erasmus, denominado Inclusive STEAM Education, para melhorar a capacidade de aspirar e imaginar futuras carreiras. Também o projeto europeu Erasmus, denominado Identidades, integrar disciplinas para elaborar novas abordagens de ensino para o desafio da educação STEAM, e o projeto Fedora, Educação Científica Orientada para o Futuro, para promover a responsabilidade e o envolvimento na sociedade de aceleração e incerteza. É com muito prazer que esse congresso conjunto da comemoração dos 10 anos do mestrado nacional e dos 60 anos da Conferência Interamericana, que chamamos a professora Olivia. Olivia, por favor. Thank you.
Obrigada. Thank you very much. I really would like, first of all, to thank for this invitation. I feel very honored. I'm very grateful to have also this chance to attend this wonderful conference and to stay in this great country. I apologize. I'm sorry. I don't speak Portuguese. I don't speak Spanish, but my English is enough Italian, I think, that it can be understandable for most of you. So, just a very, very brief positioning of myself. Thank you very much for this presentation. I come from Bologna. Bologna is well known mainly for its university, because the University of Bologna is supposed to be the oldest university in the Western world. It was founded in 1088. And this is my department, the Department of Physics and Astronomy. In Italy, it is a rather large department because it has many different research fields. And the research field in physics education and history of physics is one of these fields. Our research group is rather small, because we are only 3 faculty members. We have 4 PhD students, 1 postdoc, several master students, but we collaborate a lot with secondary school teachers. It is not a big group, but it is very active. Some of you maybe attended the ESERA conference in Bologna that we organized some years ago, just before the pandemic. And now, as it was introduced, we are deeply involved in several European projects. In particular, I just mentioned here IC because the theme of IC is future literacy, embracing complexity and systemic thinking. The project identities, which was the theme, is interdisciplinarity for pre-service teacher education. C's are open schooling, sustainability, and models of change. These are the themes of this project. And all of these themes are also now included in the project Fedora that I have the honor to coordinate. And that Fedora is actually the main context of this talk, because it addresses these themes in particular. Fedora is a project that is actually almost finishing. It includes several universities, as well as the University of Bologna, also the Kaunas University of Technology, the University of Helsinki, led by Antti Laerto, the University of Oxford. The group is led by Sibel Erduran. Teach the Future, that is a foundation of people who just work on future to teach it, to develop future thinking. I will discuss about this. And Formica Blue, that is a communication agency. So, the theme of the conference. I would like also to thank for asking me to talk about this theme, uncertainty. It is very fascinating, it is very timely, and it is also actually rather trendy in not only in physics education, but also in science education and in STEM education. Indeed, I just try to put here a sort of bird's eye view of the literature in science education on uncertainty, and this view shows that there is a deeply articulated and multi-layered structure of research in this theme. Indeed, there are different layers. The first one is concerns studies that aim to investigate how to guide the students to learn scientific concepts related to uncertainty, how to learn the theory of measurement in physics, statistics and probability concepts and law of bias theorem, for example, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, and so on. And then there is a more epistemological layer. Here there are studies that instead aim to investigate how to guide the students to learn how science works through uncertainty, how uncertainty makes science advance, how science deals with uncertainty in its intrinsic epistemic practices, like measuring, modeling, arguing, explaining. And then there is another layer, a layer aimed to investigate how to guide the students to develop what they call uncertainty and probabilistic thinking. There is, for example, the work of Rosenberg and colleagues, where they argue and they explain how to teach the students to take from, for example, bias theorem, principles for reasoning, principles of Bayesian reasoning to be used as conceptual tools, not only in science, but just to deal with uncertainty, as really tool for thinking. And then there is another layer, the layer that includes also, in my analysis, also the work of Maurizio Pietrocola and Fazio, where here they investigate instead how to guide students to learn to inhabit and to act in this society, in this risk society, in this complex society, how to deal with what they call manufactured risk or wicked problem. So in some sense, this picture also shows to what extent also training in physics for uncertainty can be a sort of political, I would say, following what Maurizio told in the panel, following a sort of political project to regenerate and to revitalize physics in order to make it relevant, not only from a scientific point of view, but also from a personal point of view, to become part of thinking and part of inhabiting and part of acting and making decisions in this complex society. My point, actually, in this big picture, my particular angle to my particular perspective to work on uncertainty is uncertainty of the future, the futuro. This is what I'm trying to understand. This is a topic that we have been started to analyze something like 10 years ago. And we started to analyze the uncertainty of the future because our teachers in their classes started to observe a new phenomenon for them. They observed that the students, their secondary school students, their teenagers, had difficulties to imagining the future. They had particular difficulty to managing the time and managing the way to organize and to push the imagination forward. The teachers realized that something was deeply changing in the new generation because the future was not something like in our generation, it was a sort of project, a sort of promise. It became something that was either invisible or a threat. And without an horizon, without a future, the teachers noticed that their students were experienced a very particular form of anxiety. Because without an horizon, a future horizon, also their present was, everything was oriented, completely oriented towards seizing the moment, sniffing out every opportunity, keeping open all possible scenarios, because they didn't have any criteria to make a choice and to give sense to their present experiences. So this was a phenomenon, in our opinion, that was very important, very critical, and we started to shop around and to see how to model, how to analyze this problem. And we encountered a very important, a book that was very inspirational for us, a book of a sociologist of time. And the book is called Social Acceleration, A New Theory of Modernity of Harmut Rosa. In this book, Harmut Rosa described the mechanism through which science and technology drives a social acceleration and create this vicious circle that create what the sociologists call future shock. We are in a moment, this is how they model, we are in a moment where the pace of change is very high, much higher than our capacity as school, as social systems to understand the change. Because as soon as we understood something, the world is already changed. So the change becomes a state. It becomes something that you have to deal with, to dance with, because we are in this moment of the future shock. And in this era of future shock, the perception of time is completely different from in the period of the classical modernity, where there was a sort what Giddens called ontological security. I'm looking at Mauricio because this is something. So in this moment of the future shock also, if the future is not longer perceived as a promise, but it is either invisible as a threat, as also our teacher noticed. And without the future, the present becomes dust of moving split. It gets fragmented in very different events. And the past, in this change, appear unable to provide lenses to interpret the present. There are some very implications of that. Implications are that we are losing a sense of directionality. We experience, not only the students, not only the young, but all of us are in a moment where, in a condition where events remain episodic in both individual and collective experience, and nothing remains the same, but nothing essentially changed. We are in this feeling that we don't see a sense of collective directions. And this is a deeply change in our modernity. This is another signal of the crisis of our classical sense of modernity, because the classical modernity was deeply characterized by a strong sense of direction, what we call the progress. Okay? Instead, now we are in a sense of directionless. Another implication is what Harmut Rosa called a sense of alienation from time. In the sense that also this is a very common experience. We are all running and running and running to do stuff and to do action and to do things, and apparently nobody obliged us to do that. But we don't want or we don't feel like to do them. So there is this sense of alienation that also produces a sense of alienation from the self and from the others, because our identity and our sense of ourselves and of the others not only derives from our action, our experiences, but also from how we situate our experiences, our action within the space-time fabric, within this space-time structures. So, this is a sort of reflection just to interpret what our teachers were noticing. And now the questions are, okay, but what does this reflection have to do with physics teaching? What manifestations of the society of acceleration can be noticed in science and in physics school classes? And much more important, is it possible, does it make sense to rethink science, to regenerate physics and physics education for equipping students with thinking tools to navigate this society of acceleration and uncertainty? So, the outline of the following part of my talk is this one. I would like to, very, very briefly, because we don't have time, but I can give you some link and some references if you want to enter in these studies. Just the first one, just some brief, I mentioned some studies on students' perception and conception of future and time. And the second part is just some hints for a future-oriented teaching approach, and some results from implementation of this approach oriented to the future. First part, students' perception and conception of future and time. In Fedora, we have produced what we call a framework to futurize science education. This is a deliverable that you can find in the website of Fedora. This was led by the University of Helsinki. And here it is reported the results of a set of studies just aimed to study and to report, to study how young people perceive the future in our countries. Some also desk research on futures in some curricula. And from these studies, the colleagues have pointed out some issues, some problems, and some recommendations to address this problem. The issues can refer to students' perception of the futures, to the perception of science and technology, and also related to educational policy. This is a synthesis, a big picture. On the left, there are the issues, and on the right, the recommendation. I just mentioned some of them here. I can give you the presentation, and but I would like just to mention these issues, because these issues that are also very consistent with also other results from Eurobarometer and stuff like that. So the first one is indeed also the study confirmed what our teachers already noticed, that there is a problem of a lack of imagination and alternatives in future narratives of the students, but mainly the reaction to this complex society is two very... You didn't see? You didn't hear? Okay. And the second point is another very typical reaction to complex problem, a hyper-simplifying reaction like polarization of search for linearization. And it is very typical, this is a very, very well-known result, that there is a sort of two-track thinking, in the sense that there is a double way to think of the future. If the students think about their personal future, okay, they think to have the perfect control of everything of their professional and future life in some sense, and they search for a sort of control of that. Instead, they are not able at all to see the future in the collectivity and in society. And the third point is instead the tendency to search for simple solution or safe bubbles. I will enter a little bit more into these two results, because I wish to present very briefly a study that on students' perception of time and students' way to deal with uncertainty during the pandemic. during the pandemic. This is, okay, in Italy, of course, pandemic is a very particular moment to be analyzed from the construct of time as a sociological construct, because also in Hamlet, it was a moment where time was out of joint, and because when dramatic events happen, the deep change acts immediately at the level of our perception of time. Indeed, if we think about our lockdown and the pandemic, and the first period of the pandemic, and if we think about the pandemics through the lens of the time and of the velocity of the society, we were in this very particular situation. On one hand, we were within our houses, and outside there was a global time accelerated by a natural phenomenon, the evolution of the virus. And we were witnesses, we observed the dynamics, and our social institutions, policy, health systems, educational systems, economic, all the systems trying to running fast and fast in order to try to flattening the curve. Do you remember flattening the curve? To do this, and to run as quickly as possible to slow down the speed of the pandemic. So we had in front of us this society who went faster and faster and faster behind the evolution of the virus. On the other hand, we were in our houses in a time that was suspended, in a present that was completely suspended, and we all had to rearrange our rituals, our personal rituals, in order to get aligned with our situation. So it was a very particular moment, because in this moment, some rituals and some time structures were disclosures, became visible. Time structure that in other period were either invisible or just considered as trivial, like, for example, the daily rituals of thinking, of learning, or doing something. So, because of this, and because we were interested in time and in this structure, in these rituals, we decided to carry out a study. And we decided to investigate how some students, secondary students, were experiencing the time during that special moment, and how they were arranging also their learning and the study during this moment, in particular studying physics and science. The sample was comprised of 9 talented and motivated secondary school students, 4 female and 5 male. They were 17, 19 years old, and they were already very interested in STEM. These are students that we were in contact with because during the pandemic they were attending one of our courses in quantum computers, okay? So the course immediately suddenly stopped, and then we were in touch with them, and so we decided to interview them through extensive individual interviews in order to understand how they were experiencing their lockdown and the social debates on the pandemic and their learning, a question about the perception of time. And we carried out, used the qualitative approach because of the data, because we were interested in entering their reasoning. Okay. From a very, the first, in analyzing the transcript of the interviews, the first thing that we noticed, because we are physicists, because this is something that we like very much, the first thing that we noticed is that the students had manifested at least three very different conceptions of time. There was one student, Stefano, who conceived time as a containers, as an external containers. He was waiting for the homework from the teachers, and he used the external request from the adults in order to organize his time. There are other students, and other students like Georgia, who was very good in instead organizing and to do her personal agenda. So she described as she started to organize her time in order to their routine and in order to train herself and not lose time and to train herself. And other students instead who took the time for personal immersion in their personal cultural experiences that were also that were a little bit neglected during the normal time. So this different conception of time somehow echo the very classical debate in physics and in philosophy of time between substantivalism and relationalist view of time. So in one sense, there is the Newtonian time seen as a container, as a real object, a container that provides the external organization of the multiplicity of the event. And on the other side, instead, time was conceived as a human construction, as relations in a relationalist perspective, elaborated in order to organize experiences and to put the experiences in an order of succession. This is a quotation by Leibniz. But there was another, from my opinion, for our opinion, much more important result. The result was that the pandemic, if usually we experience future shock, during the pandemic we had time. We were in a moment where we call the present shock. We had time. And if future shock was characterized by a sense of alienation of time, the moment of the present shock was characterized by the need to reappropriate time, to reappropriate time. So we analyzed the transcript in order to understand how the students reappropriated their time. Appropriation for us is a very technical word. It is something that we studied a lot, and also in other studies we try to operationalize it and to turn it into a theoretical construct, starting from this very inspiring but also generic definition of appropriation from Bakhtin, where appropriation means that in front of a word, in front of a concept, in front of a term, appropriation occurs when you are able to populate this word with your intentions, accent, adopting it to one's own semantic and expressive intention. So we analyzed the transcript and we were trying to understand where the students were populating time with their particular special intentions. And we found exactly this. Maybe it could be expected, but we refound it, that instead the problem was to search and to find a sense of directionality and a sense of agency. And the interviews were very different in the sense of directionality, because the students really follow their personal sense of what does it mean to find a direction. For some students, it simply meant to make a plan, to make an agenda, like Georgia. For other students, was to train, to follow some tutorials, to develop some skills. For other, meant searching for sense making. Also, sense making is a way to find a new directionality and to recombine personal. So this is probably not so, it can be understandable, not particularly, but it was also interesting to see that reappropriation of time was a way to reappropriation of the self. It was very strictly related to the need to repositioning with respect to this dramatic moment and to find the sense of maintain one's own identity, maintains one the sense of the self, and also to maintain a relationship with the others and to renegotiate the other. So this probably was something very also understandable, but this is the point. Now I arrive at the point that I wanted to stress in this part of the talk. The point is this one. In this process of time reappropriation, we noticed, first of all, a deeply and very evident detachment between the personal time and social time. All the narratives and the time appropriation were just focused and oriented to reorganize their personal life. The society outside was completely far from them. It was something that was not, and also the personal directionality was something that was related to a sense of becoming a professional, becoming and not a sense of being a citizen or agent of this social change. So there was, first of all, this detachment between the personal and the social dimension, and then also mathematics and physics. They were very good students in mathematics and physics, okay? And they used the pandemic to study a lot mathematics or physics. But why? Because they perceived mathematics and physics as this locus of certainty. For them, mathematics and physics were sources of ahistorical, unchangeable knowledge. This is what they say. Something that can be a solid baseline, something that can give a sense of certainty, something that don't change even in this dramatic moment of change from a social point of view. And also this was very evident that the school and what the teachers asked them to do was mainly focused on just increasing the skills as professional researchers in physics or in mathematics, and not instead to understand and to interpret what was happening outside their rooms and outside their houses. So this is something that also in some sense confirm also this research from that I read this paper yesterday, Sondra, of Matos, about this perception of physics teacher of time, and in physics classes. Time in physics classes is mainly perceived as a real parameter to be measured, to be quantified, and so on. So we are here. I mean, this I think is a question for us as educators, because the students, but not only the students, the teachers, but not only the teachers, ourselves probably, the researchers, there is, however, a need of security, and a need of search for some sense of safety. There is this sense. But at the other hand, we are in a society of acceleration. We are in a society of uncertainty. So also we need to prepare the students for this society, for this uncertainty society. How can we do this? How can we, in Fedora, we think, I mean, we elaborated the argument that it is important to consider and to take care of this sense, of this need of security, of safety, but it is also to find a way to balance this with the need to go out of the bubble and to take the risk and to accept the uncertainty of the society. We call, this is our slogan, a sort to find an equilibrium between the need for sense-making, the need to find a comfort zone, to find a way to have something that is solid in some sense or fluid, but also the need to search for strange-making, to educate, to have, to accept the complexity, to embrace uncertainty. So, according to these results, we also developed this approach. Can you tell me what is the time? And I don't know how much. Anyway, I 10-15 minutes. Okay. So. On the basis of these results, I just briefly describe you the main principles on the main lines of our approach to futurized science education. We started in order to think, okay, let's try to think, to futurize and to introduce the future. What does it mean to introduce the future in science education? We started to think in this way. Okay, we want that, this is our aim, to guide the students to develop what we started to call future scaffolding skills. We used this expression because we wanted to use the metaphor of the scaffolding as a sort of structure. So the structure that is important to have, also this is of course a Vygotskian metaphor, but to give a structure, a scaffolding, in order to go up and to feel that you are in some place, but also a scaffolding that allow you to see in the future and to project the imagination toward the future, and also if you are able to see the future, also to act in the presence with an horizon, with an eyes on the horizon. So this is the sense of this metaphor, but at the beginning it was actually a sort of a placeholder term. What is this future scaffolding skills? I mean, can we operationalize them? What kind of future scaffolding skills can we develop in our teaching? So we started again to, this is our approach, to go into physics, into history of physics, into the epistemology of physics, to search for some candidates to be future scaffolding skills. And actually, we discovered that indeed physics, I mean, this is not a great discovery, but however, it is another way to reanalyze the history of physics and the epistemology of physics, to see that really physics is a wonderful source of competence and thinking in order to develop future. But also, we discovered in the literature that also envisioning future is a mindset, as an attitude that can be taught. So, future indeed is intrinsic to science because it is really part of its epistemological structure of science, and it appears in the models of prediction, foresight, and causal explanation that physics and science has gradually elaborated. In our school, at least in Italy now, I saw that here there is some expansion, some new introduction, but instead in Italy, typically the curricula is mainly focused on, I'm thinking about time, okay, of the Newtonian physics and also special relativity, of course, but the structure is almost the same, where that was, of course, a source of mathematical modeling and also vocabulary and epistemological scaffolding to think about the future as something that is deterministically predictable, something that is certain, something that can be predictable, okay, and with a sort of linear causality. This is the causality that typically is taught implicitly, okay, but it's part of our curriculum that can be stressed. And also, but of course in physics, the theme of time passed through relativity, thermodynamics, of course, about the reversibility and the arrow of time. But now, also the quantum physics and the science of complex system, as the previous conference shows, are really interesting sources of models and language and epistemological scaffolding, also to think about the future in a very different way, because in these new fields, I mean, we can discuss and we can think about the distinction between epistemic and ontological uncertainty in quantum physics. Also, superposition principle and the evolution of a quantum system is an evolution of possibilities, not the evolution of one only necessary future. It's an evolution of possibilities. And also the sensitive dependence from the initial condition, the scenario buildings, the sense of randomness, the distinction between randomness in classical physics and randomness in quantum physics, they are very, very different. The sense of contingency, the projection instead of deterministic prediction, the concept of also of feedback and circular causality that are different concept of causality with respect to the linear causality that is inside classical mechanics and Newtonian mechanics. So these are very, very rich sources of vocabulary also that can be used and to turn into future thinking and future reasoning. And also these are ideas that are taken also from this by these fields of research. We discovered that exists this field, interdisciplinary field, that is called futures studies. Okay, here there are people from sociology, philosophy, history, policy, psychology, economy, and they are people who just professionally try to build scenarios and try to advise the companies or researchers just to try to create scenarios and to create and this is they produce very interesting materials to introduce and to give principles for future thinking. For example, some principles are, okay, just educate and to activate systematically the question, what could happen? Or for example, the question, what if you think, or also to think and to imagine about many possible plausible futures, and to teach, to prepare people from multiple contingencies, and also try to describe alternative futures and empowering students to influence them. Okay, this is a very, very popular image in the future studies that embeds all these thinking principles. This is called the futures cone, and this is the picture that they want to try to popularize in some sense and to educate the students to see the future not as one, okay, but as a cone of possibilities. And within this and within this cone of the possibilities, there are different possible scenarios. Some are probable, some are plausible, but there are also some desirable future. And to build these scenarios, there are very different techniques. Something, for example, the probable future, to create the scenario, the probable scenarios means to analyze the past, analyze the present, and to try to find the trends. Okay. Instead, if you want to build some plausible future, you have to not to follow the main trend, but to introduce contingencies, introduce some alternative possibility that can change the evolution of the possibility. And so this is in terms of alternative, and if you want to build desirable future, is a completely different techniques, a completely different attitude, because to build a desirable future, they suggest to reverse the sense of the time, not from the past, present, and future, but start from the future, and to do what they call the foresight, try to imagine the future according to your values, according to desire, your dreams, your possibilities, and after that you have your desirable future, go back casting, not a forecast, but a back casting, in order to think how to maximize the possibility and the probability to have that future, not only as a person, but also as a collectivity. Okay, so this these are this is I mean, this is a reference, a very important reference that is in the future studies elaborated, and that also can be easily used in the classes, and that we did it. So, from this analysis, these are the design principles that we pointed out in order to futurize science education. The first one is try to look at the physics, at its knowledge and epistemological structure, and stress, value, highlight in physics and in science the scientific temporal patterns and the causal models that progressively complexify the conception of time, overcoming the Newtonian linear time, by introducing and enriching the vocabulary and the mathematical structure also, and to see also the linear, cyclic, the arrow, internal, external, and so on. And then make also in the classes the epistemological debates on time and space and change explicit, so as to develop a epistemological vocabulary, not only a scientific vocabulary, but also epistemological. And then also incorporate in the activities some activities taken from the future studies in order to turn scientific knowledge into thinking, future thinking. and foster personal engagement by supporting creativity, foresight, and anticipation, and to take agency for the future. I don't know if you noticed, but the structure of the principle is exactly the structure that I used at the beginning to overview the literature on uncertainty. And so there is, in the sense that this is a sort of multidimensional space where future is introduced starting from physics and for science, and then that moves to the epistemology and the history, and then to try to turn this concept into a thinking, to embrace future thinking, and so as to be able also to act in the present with an eye on the horizon. So we implemented this approach in the design of several different modules. They address these are modules they are not curricular modules, okay? In the sense that these are modules that we implement. I would say curricular is difficult to say. In Italy, the students have to, okay, follow extra school activities in order to get oriented in their, and some of these activities are organized by the university. So we organize these courses on STEM topics, interdisciplinary topics, also as a way to orient them to their future. And so we implement this future approach in this because it was part of the goals of these extra school but curricular activities, okay, because they have to. And this is the structure of the module. I can give you very, very briefly the example using the module on climate change. We start from just an introduction of the module and to encountering the focal scientific topic, like in climate change, just to give an overview of the topic and to say how much interdisciplinarity and global it is. And then there is the internal core of the module that is focused on the scientific and epistemological part. So here we have labs and lessons with active learning, but probably these are the less innovative part of the module, but these are just focused on highlighting the structure, the future structure. But then there is this part, I would like to stress, this is the part of the module that has the goal to elevate science into thinking and into competencies for citizenship, okay? And this is the part where the contents are reanalyzed and analyzed from, in particular, from a perspective of complex systems. In particular, here we show how the climate system cannot be understood without assuming embracing complexity and assuming the perspective of complexity. We introduce here some concept of the complex systems, and also we involve the students here in activities in order to implement some concepts. One of the most successful, I would say, impactful activities is this one. We give the students a text. This is a part of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change. This is simplified. This is a text that we build starting from the IPCC. And we ask the students to analyze it and to point out the problems, okay, and to build a causal structure of the problem, because we wanted to analyze with them the causal structure. What are the causal the causal structure of the problem. And then we ask the students, for example, here, anyway, and then we ask the students to turn from the problems to the objective. So if one of the problem is the increasing of the anthropogenic greenhouse gases due to the emission of those gases, so the problem is turned into objective, and the objective is to reduce the emission of this. Okay, just turn from problem to objective. And this is the basis for enlarging the perspective in two senses. One is this is just a very little part of this big map. This big map is because the text wanted to be very multidimensional and also include the problems related to political negotiation, urban territory and social vulnerability, climate migration, stuff like that, because we wanted the students, all the students of a class or the different students could find a place that was much more was closest to their different interests, and they could find a place to enter the problem and to find a sense of agency with this complexity and multidimensionality of the problem. Another evolution is that in another text we wanted to introduce the distinction between linear causality and circular causality and feedback loop. So we asked the students to point out in the map where it was not possible to have just arrow, but it was important to complexify the map and to recognize also feedback loop and stuff like that. Okay. Then after that we introduced to the last part, I'm finishing. The last part of the module, where we just do some future-oriented activities, because we ask them to take the map, to position in the map and to find the problem that they feel much more important for them, and to think and to imagine a future where this, the first one is to mapping the problem and to turn the problem into objective, and also to imagine possible and desirable future where these problems are solved, not solved but rearranged in some way, and and then to try to build a story, a backcasting story, and to think about possible actions in the present to become agents of this project. So I'm finishing the last results. I just want to tell some reaction. This is a student that this is a quote that I like very much, because she described very, very well a sense of relief, a sense of hope that she found in these activities. And the sense of hope was created by in this idea of building a map, the sense of building a map, a sense of building a big picture of the problem was part of this. And also the idea that in this big picture, the problems could be turned into objective and to find a leverage point to enter this complex system. And also this, another sense of active hope was stimulated by this need to keep together local problems and global problems, individual and collective. So find a way to keep together what appeared as polarization or as a resolved tension was part of this active hope. So in this sense, we noticed in all the students this attitude. In some sense, these modules, they used always this word, I widening my perspective, my knowledge, and the future became closer to the imagination, closer to the concrete action, closer to their personal stories. And in some sense, we discovered that part of the anxiety of the students were to perceive the future as a sort of funnel, and then this idea of the cones, that the choice, one choice is not reducing the possibility, but opening up the possibility was also important for them. And also we, at the end, also try to operationalize and to describe our idea of future scaffolding skills. There is a part of scaffolding, there is the need of building skills to build a map, to give a structure of the complexity, and to give a structure of this fragmented present, to this information, to this event, give a structure in some sense. And the other, instead, are dynamical skills that are much more future-oriented, in the sense that they are skills that are dynamical because skills to keep together and to manage the tension between local and global, present and future, individual and societal, imagination and concrete action, inspiring and keeping the feet in the ground, also to keep together the multidisciplinarity dimension issues of the problem, and also the necessity the necessity of thinking, of acting, but also keeping open multiple possibilities. So these are, we think, very important skills, in particular this managing, because probably this is what we found a way to measure and to observe in the classes if they are able to balance what we call sense-making skills and strange-making skills. I just finished with this quote from a student. Talking about the future in an uncertainty present already assumes the value of a promise. This is a comment of his that we think it was very nice for us and for this work. Thank you very much for your attention.
Bom, thank you. E temos cerca de 5 minutos para perguntas. Por favor, professora, primeira. Talvez duas.
You said that a student survey during the pandemic was done with 17, 19 years old students. Are you listening? Are you listening?
Yes.
Okay,
now,
sorry.
Yes.
So I start again, okay? You said that the student survey during the pandemic was done with 17, 19 years old students who were taking quantum computing classes. What stage of schooling were they in? With what you saw during this week about the educational reality in Latin America, how do you see the possibility of implementing this kind of project in our context?
Yeah, no, indeed, as I told, those students were very talented students, okay? But I reported the students just because they were very talented. They had all the possibility, also where they captured what the schools, okay, taught them. So they also were very representative of the school culture in some of the ideals, okay, of the school culture. So I represented them not because of as representative of how students are in the schools, but just as a very particular students who really are receptors of what the schools can do the best of what the school can do. And then, they were in Italy. Okay, the main distinction are what the schools that we call lyceum. Okay, these are schools.
High school students, liceu?
Excuse me?
High school students, liceu or not?
This is high schools that is called lyceum. It's a generic terms, okay? And we have classical lyceum, scientific lyceum, and then we have psychopedagogical. This is the terms lyceum means that they are typically oriented to the university, because then we have technical schools and vocational schools. These students were from lyceum, so the students who wanted to go to the university. But the course of quantum computer, actually in our course is attended both by students from the scientific lyceum, but also from students of the technical schools, students who love computers, informatics, and because in Europe now there is, okay, this is a very long story, but in Italy, in Europe now there is a very strong push to organize this course of quantum technologies and quantum computers, because they are in the futurists of Europe, they are imagining that in the near future we will need a lot of technicians working with quantum computers. So the school and the technical school and the vocational school, all of them are very pushed toward this kind. So in these courses, we tend to analyze the second quantum revolution also from a technical and from also a sort of revolution in the professions, and not only in the very technical terms of quantum physics, okay? But it is really something that the second quantum revolution now is really on the journals. And
so these ideas of these concepts of time that you presented at the end, do you think that they can be taught in any...
No, sorry, sorry, sorry.
No,
this is a misunderstanding, sorry. The students that I presented at the end are not the students of the pandemic. Okay. Because the student, sorry, I made a mistake, because the students of the pandemic, we were not able to finish the module, okay? Because the pandemic, we just did some lessons and we didn't finish our module, we didn't futurize, we didn't do the future activities with them. They are completely different students.
No, the point is that it seems to me very interesting when you, at the end, you discuss the idea to introduce in the high school this idea, these concepts, these different concepts of time in physics. And I start to think about if we could do that in Brazil, in which level we could do that. This is why I asked this.
So this is a different question, because the students of the quantum computer are instead these activities. Instead, for example, now we have a technical school, who introduced these modules and this approach as a sort of change in the structure of school, in the school, because we have a course that is called Citizen Education, Educazione Civica. This is part of the curriculum that is interdisciplinarity. This is a slot where all the teachers have to collaborate on that. And in this school, for example, they use climate change, and in a sense of futurizing science education, in the sense of the future, and with all the students, not all, but many teachers of the schools, also the teachers of economy, the teacher of this is a technical school. So I think that, and we are also doing something with some teachers in the classes. But
okay, thank you.
Alguém mais? Mais alguma pergunta?
Hi, Olivia. Thank you for your presentation. I'm, besides a physics professor, I am a student on psychology. I am undergraduate in psychology. And I would like to know from you, including, I recognize lots of stuff of existential background and phenomenology background. I would like to know from you which role the emotional self-regulation of students we can address, or should we address in teaching?
Thank you very much. This is indeed the topic of one of my PhD students, because we are trying to reanalyze this data in order to see if it is possible to recognize what epistemic emotion, in particular the emotion that can give you the sense of direction. We start from Einstein. Einstein had very wonderful writing about how we recognize the sense, the feeling of directions in thinking about special relativity, because in this moment it's not only important to see or to imagine the future, but also to feel the present. And when the moment is in this crisis, also to recognize the emotions that can be an orientation for you and to follow and to try to learn, because now they are focused on frustration, they are focused on anxiety. Instead, just to keep the feeling of what kind are instead the epistemic emotion that can be to sniff the present and to find the sense of, because in this, I mean, this is a very important theme that, because in this moment of fast changing, before conceptualization you feel, you have emotions, and some of them are epistemological emotion. And so to recognize what are the good and the emotion to trust, And also science. I mean, when we do research, we know perfectly what are the emotions that we have to follow because we are in the good track and what we are instead. So the sense of the directionality is, this is how we, if you have ideas, if you have suggestions, they are welcome because we are a little bit stuck.
A última pergunta, e por favor, bem objetiva, que já passamos da hora.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. It was a very interesting approach. I think that implementing these ideas requires important change in the teaching of physics, objectives, and especially methodologies of classroom. What do you think about active learning for the development of these topics in the classroom?
It requires a lot of change, but I think that the change is much more on the positioning with respect to the knowledge and to give the different priorities or the different importance in knowledge, and much more than in the methodology, in the sense that, of course, this is important to evolve. The students have to feel engaged. Okay, this is part of the game. Otherwise, and so all these activities taken from future studies, like to create a map. The map, for example, is just a way to engage them. They work in group to create a map and to discuss and to do, and then to move the map from a problem to objectives. And then also the students are deeply engaged, not only in understanding a text, but also are deeply engaged in negotiating the values when they have, for example, to think about what is the problem that they want to solve, and this is also very important because they are engaged at different levels to understand the content of a content, just to recognize the map, and also to engage in, to move, to negotiate values and priorities and stuff like that. And so the active learning in this sense is also very articulated because their engagement is active, acts at different level of the knowledge and the level of understanding, at the level of the emotion, at the level of the social relationship, at the level of arguing, at the level, and there are very strong discussions. So this is part of the game. And what, I don't know if I can, because this is something. What they really, we were very moved by this, because when they are engaged in this kind of activities, they really realize that they feel the need, they feel the need to have someone who gives them a structured activity to create a picture, okay? And it is really something that at the end gives them a sense of relief, because it's a sort of compass, you know, a sort to navigate, and because they are not able to nobody of us. I mean, it's complicated to have a discussion structured and also to move from different layers of knowledge. And so active learning is important, but at very different level, also involving aims, values, but also involving decisions about the concrete action.
Olivia?
Yes. Oh, okay.
I'd just like to thank you very much for your speech and say that the way I see it, I see your ideas very much aligned with meaningful learning, yeah, and critical meaningful learning, as well as with Paulo Freire's idea, yeah, of, you know, education for action, yeah, for liberation and all of that. So, and as a high school teacher, I've been a high school teacher for 30 years now. So I understand and I see my students just that way. They are standing still, seeing acceleration, and they are in fear. They are in anxiety. They are in fear. And I think that your ideas is like, okay, let's face our fears. Let's projects, let's see the future, and let's try to see what we can do. And then we lessen our anxiety and change the future and the world into a better place. So congratulations, okay, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oi. Muito obrigada às mediadoras, professora Deise, professora Stephanie, professora Olivia. Bom, pessoal, vamos fazer agora aqui uma pausa para o almoço. A gente, a princípio, o horário de retorno era às 14h, então façam um almoço o mais rápido possível. Vou aproveitar já para falar que tem um restaurante aqui da DUNB, ele está aberto hoje, não ficou aberto durante a semana, mas hoje ele abre. É aqui, logo na frente das escadas, ok? E